start recording because it is Monday. It is 7 p.m., which means it's time to draw things in Fusion 360. It has been a while since we have done a wood shop project in this class. And so that is our goal today. And here is our wood. I should turn off half of the lights in this room. That would be nice, huh? Let me take care of that right now. And y'all can see the screen. There we go. So you can kind of see now. So there is our woodshop project sitting on the Burning Man Playa. But it will be hopefully a fairly straightforward project. I want to focus more in these beginner classes on sketches and constraints. I think it's a fundamental that I am still picking up on and learning, so it's probably good to add to all of our bags. So we're going to focus kind of some of these beginner classes on making good sketches, making fully constrained sketches, and knowing when and where to add constraints. And then stretch goal today, maybe we will get to actually make a drawing that we could print out and take into the wood shop. So here's an example of a drawing from this particular piece. So you got something that you can take into the wood shop if you're actually going to try to make a thing. Alright, so I am going to start with a new document because we're all familiar with the Fusion workspace, right? So we can skip the kind of basic intro-y kind of stuff and move into the meat right away. And here, tell you what, I'll show you kind of how a little behind the scenes how I made this, what my process was here. So the idea is we're going to start with a basic sketch here that is just a basic square. We'll be able to make this square whatever size you want to in order to make the coffee table the perfect size for you. And then on one of the edges of that square, we're gonna draw a little plane at an angle, and that plane at an angle is going to be kind of repeated around the whole square in order to make our coffee table shape here. So we've got a couple of basic joints here that are kind of cut at a nice, fun 5-degree angle, so that'd be fun to do on the table saw or bandsaw. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. I am going to start by creating a sketch. So I'll click on Create, and I'll come down to Create Sketch, and I am going to choose the top surface to draw on. So I'm going to kind of spin my navigation cube in the top right hand corner so I can look down at that surface in between my green and my red axis there. That is my top surface, and I'm going to create the sketch right on that surface right there. Now, we've talked about sketches and constraints and having things fully constrained here. The real way you have something fully constrained is by having things constrained in size and in location. So the only way that I know of right off the bat to have things constrained in size and in location is by having something in your sketch connected to your origin. So I kind of make that a general rule to have something in my sketch connected to my origin. So that is why I am going to choose a center rectangle here. Also, later on, we're going to end up making a circular pattern. So it's really convenient to have the circle of our drawing world, around the circle of our drawing. So, and I'm going to make my coffee table a little bit smaller. I made it 36 by 36 before. I think that was a little big. I think I'm going to go 18 by 18. I'm going to make it like half the size, because it turned into a really big coffee table. So this first rectangle is going to be 18 by 18 here. In fact, I'm going to go actually smaller. I'm going to do 16 by 16. Of course, some creative freedom could be used. I won't stop you from making the coffee table that is just right for your living room. All right, and I'm going to hit enter. Believe it or not, that is all we need to do on this sketch. Now, something I'm not very good at pointing out is our sketch is fully constrained, and we can tell that in two different ways. So our sketch, all the lines are all black, and what that means is it's fully constrained in position and in location here. And just for fun, if I delete one of those dimensions, you can see it turned blue here. Some of my sketch turned blue, but also secondarily, our sketch icon changed. So if I re-add that dimension, you can see the sketch icon's got a little lock icon on it. And that little lock icon indicates that it's fully constrained in position and in size. So that's kind of a way that you can look at your sketches without going into them and know that they're fully constrained. I had watched an interesting video of somebody who seemed to have a belief that having the fewest amount of measurements was better. And one of the ways that he had fewer measurements is like, all right, I always want this to be a square. So something that he kind of encouraged was, instead of having two measurements that are both the same, both 16 inches, that you could have a measurement and then also an equal constraint. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So if you use this equal constraint instead of one of your measurements, if I do that, and I say this line and this line are equal, I get to that same result. I get a fully constrained sketch. But now if I want to change the size of my rectangle or my square, I only have to change one measurement instead of two. Maybe it's easier to do it that way. Maybe it's just as easy to, hit the tab key and type in the measurement the second time around. But I leave that up to you. I just kind of wanted to point that out, that equal constraint can be kind of interesting sometimes. All right, so we've got a fully constrained rectangle. So now we can say finish sketch. And I am going to name that sketch. I am going to name it just the base size, which is kind of the sketch that we're making kind of to define the size of our coffee table here. Now the next thing we're going to do is we want to locate a plane that is at a 90-degree angle on one of these lines here. It doesn't really matter which line we choose. This is we're going to draw our shape. This shape here is what we're drawing next, just kind of on the side of that line there. So in order to locate that line, or locate that sketch, I first need to create a plane at an angle. So that plane at an angle, we can pick any of those four sides of our square. And now we can specify that that plane is going to be, for me, 90 degrees to that. And if you're ever unsure about if you're doing the right angle, you can always kind of look and see, kind of pan around your navigation cube and just kind of make sure that that angle is correct. Sometimes angles and positive and negative numbers, they're not always the same from computer to computer, depending on what line you're locating this on. That may change, but we want that that plane to be going tangent to our original sketch. I'm sorry, normal to our original sketch. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now we've got a construction folder that popped up, and I'm going to go ahead and name that construction plane that we just made too. We're only going to have one of them, but I think this is just a good practice just to name everything as they come up. And I'm just going to call it the leg face. Literally anything is better than construction 1. You could call it leg, or you could call it a side. You can call it the best frickin' plane ever. And now on that plane, we can create another sketch. This is one of those occasions too where for beginners, I often find people who are beginners have something selected, and then they go and they choose a thing that they want to do. So they're like, they may have this square selected, and then they say, oh, I want to come up and create a sketch. But if I do that, it's going to create a sketch for me on the same plane that I already have a sketch on. So it's one of those things that I see beginners to do a lot. So before you want to choose what you want to do, before you choose what you want to do it to. So you want to, I'll make sure I click off into nowhere if I've got something selected. I'll just click off into nowhere land here. And then I can go and create a sketch and not accidentally create a sketch on the wrong plane. All right, so now let's go ahead and create another rectangle. This time we're going to make a 3-point rectangle here. And we're really going to take advantage of adding constraints after the fact here, just so we can stretch that muscle a little bit. So I'm creating a 3-point rectangle, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of click off in the middle of nowhere here, and I'm going to specify a size of this rectangle. I think I want it to be, let's go with 20 inches. And then if I hit the tab key, or not the, I have to click, and then I can move my mouse up, and we'll make it, let's say, 5 inches tall. That'd probably be fine. That's interesting. So my sketch is, oh no, it was just highlighted, sorry. So we've got a bunch of blue lines, and we've got a rectangle that's not in the right spot. So our rectangle is not fully constrained, and we want to bring it into constraint here. What we really want to do here is we want the center of this rectangle to be coincident with the center of our other rectangle. So we want those two centers to exist kind of planaire with each other. So the way that I'm going to choose to do that is I'm going to create a line that goes through that rectangle corner to corner. So if I create a line that goes from this corner to this corner, now I'll be able to find the center point of that rectangle. So the little blue triangle, that's our little center point, midpoint constraint popping up there. And what I can do in order to locate that midpoint constraint really easily is I'm going to put a point on the line. So from our create menu, you can see it's a very little used option for me. I don't create a whole lot of points. And really this is kind of the only time when I do use it to create a point. It was when I'm finding the midpoint of a line and I need to make two things coincident to each other. So using the point tool is pretty easy. You just hover over where you want to make your point, and we want ours to be right in the middle of that line that we just made. And then you click, and there it is. You can see the midpoint constraint popped up right there, right next to it. I'm going to go ahead and change this line to a construction line. So right now, our rectangle is being bisected in half by our line that we drew down the middle of it. And we're eventually going to extrude this, and it'll just make it easier to extrude if we don't have to extrude the two halves. So if I change this line here, change the line type on the line to a construction line, either by clicking the little construction icon on our line type in the sketch palette, or by hitting the X key on the keyboard. That will do the same thing. So now you can see that doesn't get bisected in half. When I go to extrude that later, it's just one solid shape. So now, in order to lock these things on top of each other, you can see I can still just move this around freely. What I'm going to do is, from my constraints menu, I'm going to go ahead and choose the coincident constraint. And if I choose this coincident constraint, and then I choose the center point of the line, and then the center point of our world, then they exist right on top of each other. Now, we are still not fully constrained because we're not constrained in an angle. You can see I can still click and drag, and I can twist this thing around a circle, even though it stays constrained in the center. It still rotates. So let's go ahead and add the last constraint that we need to in order to lock that rectangle in place. And that last constraint is just adding a dimension that defines that angle. So you can add a dimension after the fact from the Create menu. If you just come down to the Sketch Dimension option, and then I specify this kind of line that is in the middle of my, this is my rectangle or square that we drew right at the beginning of class. If I click on that, and then click on one of the lines, or one of the lines that make up my rectangle, then I can place this measurement here. And I'm going to go ahead and make it, if I make it 15 degrees, that doesn't seem like too much. That seems like, let's make it 12 actually. Let's make it a little bit not as steep. All right, cool. Now, the last thing we need to do here is we need to create our notches. And our notches are going to, they're going to come in from the top and bottom respectively. And they're going to, the middle of the notches are going to be right at the middle of these points here. So we've kind of done part of this process already. We've located a midpoint on a rectangle, and so we're going to kind of do these same steps that we just did in order to locate our notches. So first I'm going to create my first notch. So I'm going to go ahead and say 2-point rectangle is what I'm going to make. And I'm just going to draw it off in the middle of nowhere here. So I'm going to make it 2 inches high. It'll be plenty. And then I'm thinking the thickness of my wood is going to be 1.5 inches. Nice beefy coffee table. That's what I like. And now on this line right here, I'm going to use that same trick that we did in order to find the midpoint, and then make that midpoint coincident to this point here. So I'll come up to my Create menu, and I'll choose to create a point. I'll create that point right there on that bottom line there. And now from my Constraints menu, I can choose the coincident option. And I'll pick the point that I just made on the line, and the point that exists on the end of my little rectangle. Is it kind of easy to see? Is it hard to tell what we're doing here? So like if I look at this a little bit more three-dimensionally, the notch lives right on the intersection of those two, of that corner.
So you do add a point to the end of that line?
I did, yeah. Well, the point was already there. So the point kind of already existed here. These little purple lines. So I didn't need to add that already. Excuse me.
And when I did that, it didn't snap to that.
Yeah, kind of popped right down into place.
Oh. So I did this. The point. And that. And then
Yeah.
Card in the radio area yours?
Yes.
You mind if I use it? Just
There we go.
up
Perfect.
on the truck?
No problem.
Okay.
Put her
Yeah,
back.
must have maybe misclicked the first time or something like that. Yeah, so then it'll pop right into place like that. And then we're gonna do that one more time, except on the opposite side. So we're gonna kind of do the reverse of that. We'll draw a little rectangle down over here somewhere. So again, I'll come up to my create menu. I'll make a 2-point rectangle. It's going to be 2 inches tall, 1.5 inches wide. This would be a good use of parameters for those of you who have done stuff with parameters, like if you wanted to have like a material thickness parameter, and then you'd have that material thickness here and you'd have that material thickness there, and then when you go to extrude it, you'd use that material thickness parameter again. And that way, if you want to change the wood stock that you're using, so I'll click on create, and then I'll add my midpoint, this time to the top of that line. So before we put it down here, this time we're adding it to the top here. And now I can choose constraints and coincident, and what my guess is what a secondary thing you'll see when we do this last constraint is we'll see the little red lock icon appear on our sketch too, is my guess. So if I click that midpoint and click that point, and indeed our little red lock icon appeared, and you can see all of our sketches black except for the purple, which is a projected line. And there we go. I'm going to move some of my numbers around here so they're a little bit easier to read if I ever have to come back and read these later. And then I might kind of come around and take a look at your sketches, see how you did.
Okay, Carl, I got lost because my rectangle got tangled up with my first sketch, and they
Okay.
were tied together, and it was over constrained and
Oh,
wouldn't let me do anything, so I had to back off and redo my rectangle.
Okay.
Now, I got lost. How do you set the angle and specify like
Yeah.
the offset angle there?
So in the create menu,
Yes,
you can find the sketch dimension option.
okay,
And then I clicked on one of the angles, one of the long angles of my rectangle. So like either the top angle or the bottom angle. That one is good. Yeah. Yeah.
what do you mean the angle?
Yeah, that
Click
one right
in
there.
the area
Well,
there?
just click on that two line.
Oh, okay,
And then you can click on the black line secondly. The other black line, you just have it, yeah, there you go. You can click on that line. And then you can place your mouse in between those two lines, and then you can click a third time. So now you're just kind of placing that dimension. So anything in there is fine. And now that's a degree measurement.
right.
So now I went with 12. You can go with 10 or 15
Okay.
or 5. Whatever makes you smile. There you
Okay,
go.
all right.
And then to place our notches, we made a couple of 2-point rectangles.
Yeah,
So, and actually, I wonder how you can make the notches. I wonder if you can have the notches done for you in the next step. Because the next thing is you're going to take a pattern of them,
mm-hmm,
and they're going to intersect with each
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, just a couple of 2-point rectangles, and we just drew them off in the middle of nowhere over there.
Okay.
And they were 2.5 inches or 2 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide. And
Okay.
then on the midpoint of the lower line there,
Yeah.
we added another center point, another midpoint. Perfect. And then you can make that point coincident with one of that purple point right there.
Okay.
And then we want to do the same thing, just upside down on the other side.
Yeah.
So we do another 2-point rectangle over there. And,
All right. Thank you.
yeah, for sure. How'd you do? Cool? Cool. Yeah. So what'll be interesting later is because this is fully constrained, I feel a lot better about changing things on a fully constrained sketch and things moving predictably. So because this sketch is fully constrained, I feel a lot better about saying, all right, this is 5 degrees now. It's probably going to be just fine. Everything will move predictably. Where'd that 5-degree measurement go? Here it is, right over here. So I'll go back to 12. Or I suppose we could have, if this was an advanced class, I probably would have made this whole thing with parameters. Because then we could just change 1 or 2 parameters and our whole sketch would change. But we won't go there this time. So we're done making that sketch. I'm going to go ahead and name that sketch. I'm going to name it, this is the leg, so I'm going to call it the leg sketch. And then I'll just take a brief pause. Let us all get to the same place here. And then, and we're making good time, so, you know, there's no rush, guys. No rush. Life is too short to be in a hurry, man. It's Monday night. We're just hanging out, drawing things in Fusion 360. I got a cold beer, so win-win for me. Nice. All right, cool. So now we can finally extrude a thing. We can finally make a 3-dimensional shape. But again, I think in these beginner classes especially, I'm going to spend more time making the sketches, because I think the sketches are the fundamental parts of what we're doing here. So the more time we can spend kind of mastering our sketching skills, the better it'll be in the long run. All right, so now from my create menu, I'm going to go ahead and choose the all-powerful extrude tool here. And I'm going to pick, I still end up having to pick the 2 sides, even though I went and made that a construction line, because I've got that line that kind of projected itself in there. But anyway, so that'll be fine. I'm going to choose to extrude this symmetrically. So instead of a direction of one side, I'm going to extrude it symmetrically because we really want to keep our notches are right on the center of our corners, and we want to keep that corner point in the center of our stock here too. Otherwise, the next step won't really work. And I believe we were doing this 1.5 inches. This is kind of a recent addition to the extrude tool when you're extruding symmetrically. In the last, over the summer this happened, there's like a measurement type that lives here, and you can choose the measurement. Either you're typing in the half length, so you want it to go out 1.5 inches in each direction when you're going symmetrically, or you can choose that you're typing in the whole length. So you don't have to do that math of dividing whatever that number is in half.
Mine looks like a box, and not a.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so it's got that right there. Oh. Because you have the line selected and not the shape. So try that. Oh, see here. Here we go. We have a teachable moment here. So, there are a handful of different workspaces at the top. And you'll notice all of my tools are blue. And that is because I'm in the solid workspace. If all of your tools are orange, you're in the surface workspace. The surface workspace will let you do things weird like extrude just a line. So if I click on create and then extrude, I can do something weird like this, just extrude a line. So you want to be in the solid workspace. So up at the very top, up above all the tools, you can see those, there's solid, surface, mesh, sheet metal, plastic, and utilities here. So if we go to the solid workspace and then choose to extrude from that workspace, then hopefully we'll be extruding a solid shape.
Yep, now it's a solid.
Nice. Kind of a fun point if a benefit for using keyboard shortcuts, like the E key for the extrude tool. The E key for the extrude tool is always the extrude tool in the solid working environment. So even if you're in one of the other environments, surface or mesh or sheet metal, if you hit E, it'll always be the solid extrude. So there's probably a keyboard shortcut for the surface extrude. I don't do it because I don't use it very often. But all right, so enough blabbing. We've extruded out a thing. I'm going to go ahead and name that body right away. That body is our leg. I'm going to go ahead and hide my sketches because I don't really need to see them anymore because I'm done using them. And now we can create our pattern here. So from our create menu, I'm going to come down to pattern, and I'm going to choose to make a circular pattern. And if we choose the body that we just made, either by choosing it, by clicking on it in our drawing view, we can also click on it in the bodies folder over in our browser. The axis that I'm going to make this pattern on is going to be the blue z-axis. Our distribution type is going to be full. We're making this pattern go all the way around. Your pattern may have defaulted to 3, but we indeed want to have a pattern of 4. Quattro legs for this particular coffee table. And then I'm going to say Oakley dokley. And there we go.
So you go back on.
Oh yeah. Back to like here.
Yep. See, mine didn't pop up like that.
Oh, cool. So it could be. Let me come and take a look. So you have to you click select your axis, and then you choose that blue axis right there. There we go. And now you'll be able to just type in the number 4, or that's 34. That's a lot. That's a big pattern. Nice. Nice. Cool. So now the last thing that we need to do here on our model is we need to create our top. I was just kind of imagining a glass top on this coffee table. Now, we really like our plane of our coffee, or top of our coffee table to live right at the top of our shape here. And there is a way that we can locate a plane just using the points of the top of our little objects here. In the construct menu, there is an option to create a plane through 3 points. And that is a great way to make this plane here. So I'll say, hey, create a plane through 3 points. And I can pick any 3 points that are one of the 8 points that make up the top edge of our rectangle. So like that one and that one and this one over here would be fine, but any of these 8 points, any 3 of the 8 points that make up the top edge would be sufficient. And then I'm going to go ahead and say OK. I've got a plane that I can name again. You know, naming things is my favorite thing. So this is going to be our glass plane. Plane in which we are going to draw our glass. I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch on that plane. Now, I am going to turn on one of the sketches that we made here. So that very first sketch we made, I'm going to turn that on because I'd like to use that center point. So I'd like to make another center rectangle here. So I have or you can make a circle. This could be a circle. That'd be fine. I won't judge you. In front of you, if you make a circle, I'll just judge you behind your back. It'll be fine. So I'm going to turn on the sketch that is our base, that I named base size, just so I can see that point that was the center point of the original square that we first made at the beginning of class. And now I can choose an option here that's called project. So I can take geometry that I drew on a different sketch and I can project it up to the sketch that we're working on right now. If I choose that project option and I click on that little center point, you can see that I've got one geometry selected, and I'm just going to say OK. It kind of turns into a little purple dot.
I got a 1.
Oh, good. What kind of one? You know you're doing something right. Oh, your sketch 3 is not visible. There we go. Yeah, you were projecting something onto the sketch that wasn't visible. So because you had sketch 3 turned off, so you're projecting it onto sketch 3. Yeah, so yeah. All right, cool. So now we can create our final center rectangle here, or like I said, you could make a center circle here. You can make a center diameter circle. That will be 100%. In fact, I'm going to do that just a change of pace. I made a square the first time. I'm going to make a circle the second time here. If I make it just big enough, 28 inches. Seems like that was just big enough for my 16-inch coffee table leg. But you can make yours a different size if that fits for you. Drag that measurement out so it's easy for me to read at a later date. And then I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch. Got one final sketch to name. This final sketch is our glass top. And then the final extrusion that we need to do here. So if we click on create and then come on down to extrude. I'm just going to extrude that circle up 1/4 of an inch. Oh, hey, I got to go negative 1/4 of an inch. That's kind of weird. So negative and positive numbers are always weird to me in Fusion. They often are the opposite of what I am expecting. I am indeed going away from my origin, so this seems like this should be a positive number to me, but it is not. Yeah, I have to type in a negative number in order to go in the right direction, so always keep an eye on your positives and negatives. And I'm making a new body, and I'm going to say okay. So I'm going to kind of come and take a peek, see how we did. Nice, very nice, very premium, very good, very good. So here's the real test, right? Is if our sketch is fully constrained, we should be able to go back in time and kind of change something that's pretty fundamental about our sketch and have things work. So if we come back to that very first sketch we did, and I change it to 12 inches instead of 16, look at that. It still is doing a thing. So, kind of cool. Or we could change the angle measurement. I could go back to this sketch here and change this angle measurement. I bet we could go steeper the shorter we go. Could I go 18? I can go 18 degrees. Make it even steeper. So then you get it taller. Your coffee table starts getting taller. This is really nice because, like, a lot of times I start drawing a thing, and I'm not really sure. Like, when I first started drawing this thing, I had no idea what this angle would need to be at in order to achieve a certain height on my coffee table, right? But if I make sure I constrain everything the whole way through, I can go back and fix the things that I didn't know based on knowledge I gain in the future. So we've got 15 minutes left. So, choice time. Would you rather see how we make this drawing? Or would you rather see how we make it look pretty? Renderings or drawings? Any votes? No preference?
It's like rendering.
Rendering?
I'll go with
Rendering. All right, cool. Rendering it is. Let's go a step further than rendering. So, you can, in Fusion, specify a physical material for your items. And the advantage of specifying a physical material is you can get close to knowing how much something is going to weigh before you make it. And depending on the size of the thing you're making, that can be really handy. In the job I am in currently, it's really handy to know if something is going to be too heavy for the truck that we're going to try to put it on before we put it on the truck, or before we build the thing, right? So in the modify menu, there is an option called physical material. And I've been kind of trying to get in the habit of starting with updating my physical materials before I update my appearances. This physical material, what it lets us do here is if I spin open the little glass tab, the little glass folder, is it'll let us pick a kind of glass. Now, each of these glasses will have different physical properties, both in appearance and in density. So you can kind of play around until you figure out one that's close to the physical material that you're actually using. But for this purposes here, I'm just going to choose this regular glass option. And in order to use it in your model, you click and drag on it, and then you drop it on top of the body that you want to change to that physical material. At the very end, I'll show you one last pro tip. So it has to do with physical materials here. You can also drag that material. I could drag it on top of a component in my browser, and it would take everything in that component and make it all the same physical material. And if I made new bodies, any new bodies I made in this component would also just automatically inherit that physical material that I assigned to that component. But we just have one glass here that we're going to use. And now the other pieces here, I'm imagining these made of a nice, you want to have an office that smells of a rich mahogany. So I'm going to use this nice mahogany here as my physical material. Something I'm not aware, can I change the angle here? I don't think I can change the angle. Relief bump? No. So some programs will let you change the angle that your material is. So, like for example, this mahogany, the grain is definitely going the wrong direction. It's hard to see on the screen, sorry. But the grain is parallel. It should be parallel to the boards, and it is definitely not. Some 3D programs will let you change that material direction, but you can't really do that here in Fusion at this point.
So,
Yeah.
So how would you like do the wood for all four at once?
So if you wanted to do the wood for that is a good question. Let me undo a couple of times here, and now I'll go to modify, and I'll go back to physical material. If I, over in my browser here, if I click on the first leg, and then I hold shift, and I click on the last leg, so I select all my legs all at the same time, now I can take that mahogany material and either drag it on top of one of them in my browser, or I can drag it on top of one of them in my drawing view, and it will apply that material to all of the selected objects. Good question, thank you. All right, and then the last step here to actually making a rendering here is we'll leave our design workspace in the very top left-hand corner. There's a button that says Design, and if we click on that, we can come down to the Render option. The second option over, the very first option is Appearance. We kind of already applied an appearance based on physical material, so we can kind of skip over that option. And we can go to the scene settings here. The scene settings let us pick an environment that we'd like to see this live in. So there are a couple of environments that it kind of gives you. You can kind of like stick it in a plaza. And this is a click and drag kind of thing again, so you click on the thing and then drag it out over your scene. It probably doesn't make sense to have a coffee table in the middle of a plaza, but it is kind of cool that you can see the reflections of the plaza in the glass. I think that's kind of fun. I don't know if this is like France or St. Petersburg or something like that. Somebody will tell me in the comments what capital city this is. I'm guessing this is St. Petersburg. But lots of different options here. You know, this one is a very Wisconsin-y feel to me. Nice little rocky road. Or you can just pick a, you know, studio kind of environment.
Okay, so I clicked on the scene and it's not like,
If you click on it and then you drag it out over your view and then drop it. Makes sense? Yeah, so click and drag. And then it might just be like, that might be the one you're looking at already. So drag like the crossroads or the, yeah. Picking it up again. Try one of those scenic ones. Oh, here, click the download button. Sorry. Now you'd probably be able to. Maybe the computer's being kind of slow. Saw something. The lighting changed, and it says it's in a field. That's interesting. Mike, did yours update? Yours is different.
No, I had to fight to get it to turn all 3 legs into wood.
Oh, okay, right.
It gave me 3 legs wooden, and then when I tried making the 4th, then it started fighting. So I lost how you did the setup there.
So now you just have to, if you click on where yours says design up here in the top right-hand corner, top left-hand corner, sorry, where it says design,
Yep.
if we go down to render,
Ah,
and then the second tool over, the first one is like a little color wheel, that's your appearance color wheel. The second one over is the scene settings. So that lets you kind of change your environment around in theory. And it's interesting, it looks like your lighting is changing, but your view isn't. So I'll have to come and take a look at that after here, sorry.
the graphics card is not.
Yeah, maybe,
Right up there.
yeah. Once you choose your kind of scene setting here, you can kind of frame it up in your drawing view or in your view where you want to see it. And then if I click on the little teapot, the teapot, obviously, universal symbol for I want to render something, right? I mean, go make yourself a pot of tea, I think is what this is saying. Oh, I need to save.
I need to stop by for the jokes more.
Just for the jokes. For the bad jokes, because I am nobody's father. They're not dad jokes, they're just really bad. Alright, so now if I click on the universal symbol for rendering a thing, my kind of default here is I choose the video option. So these are all different kind of presets that you can use, web, mobile, print, and basically these different presets equate to how big of a picture that you want to actually render. Print is obviously, bigger than, mobile. It shows you the pixel sizes here, but I tend to go with tried and true standard HD. I choose to do a local render as opposed to rendering in the cloud, because then I don't use any cloud credits. It probably takes a little bit more time, but that's fine for me. And then I just hit the render button. And then it will chomp away down here in my rendering queue until it's done and happy. So I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody watching on the YouTube. Bye, YouTube. And then I'll come around and see how you guys did here with your final bits. We'll see you next week. Next week, advanced class. Next week, I already know what we're doing next week. I'm that far ahead. I'm getting better. We're making. This is a coffee holder for my bike. because when you're pedaling somewhere, sometimes you want a hot cup of coffee, and you want your coffee to not spill everywhere. So I got spring-loaded coffee bike mount. This is not the spring we're going to use. My springs are coming from McMaster tomorrow. So and I have extra springs in case anybody needs one. But yeah, next week, spring-loaded coffee bike mount. Cool.
Cool.
All right. See you next week.